Hi, Dakshinamurthy. Thank you so much for joining me today for the podcast. We're really glad to have you here. And I already requested you if I could call you DM. So I'll now focus on calling you DM. How do you feel? Did you know about Suraasa? Anything that you'd like to share about Suraasa first, and then let's go into our discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rishabh, for having me here. And it's a pleasant, very pleasant time for me to be spending with you and the team at Suraasa. Actually, 1 year back, I had this idea of, okay, so how do we look into teacher professional development? And 2 years back, in fact, like I was doing a lot of work back then with teacher professional development. I just went to Google and I just typed, because every time I think of teacher professional development, I come across organizations in my personal opinion, either fossilized ideas, or I just keep looking at the same things that keep coming again and again. So I just went on Google and typed out teacher professional development startups India. Okay, that's all I typed. And there were some 3 companies that came back and came the top 3 searches, and I loved Suraasa's work. I was pleasantly surprised that, oh wow, like somebody like this is doing something in India, and that's fantastic, right? Like since then, I have actually bookmarked your website on my device, and I do follow up on the kind of courses you people are adding, and what is the kind of work and explorations that you're doing both in the country as well as abroad. So yeah, kind of a stalker of the organization, but it's
Thank you
a
so much.
lovely time to be here with you as well.
It's actually a pleasure to hear that, we've been the core team, the entire team, and we have people who are 19 years old to people who are 50 plus years old in the organization. Everybody with one common vision that we want millions of teachers who are highly skilled and creating impact in in teaching and learning all across the world. And when somebody like you shares that you admire the work that we do, it really becomes very motivating for the entire team. Thank you so much for that. Uh, Let me take this moment actually to also share what we are building right now. I'm sure the listeners would be able
Yeah.
to, get an idea of that as well. So last many years, we've always been focused on how do we make teacher education more, inspirational for all the current teachers and future teachers, because I'm sure one thing that we both will agree on is the world requires a lot many more real teachers. I'm not saying teachers, I'm saying real teachers. And like United Nations talks about qualified teachers, and then every country has their own definition of qualified. Somebody says B.Ed is qualification, somebody says having a particular skill is qualification, but that's why we are saying skilled teachers. We're not going to the word qualified at all. And now what we realized was that there is a human motivation for everything, like that it's only a carrot and a stick, like what we've read in our psychology. And how do we really create something which really becomes interesting for every teacher around the world, and we get more by choice teachers than by chance teachers. So what we're now doing is we've built these professional development structures, some international qualifications, and now we have added job technology to it, wherein schools from different parts of the world can come in and look at these highly skilled teachers and can hire them. So we're very excited about this all. And I'm sure you'll see the release. This is like a pre-release opening of the cards in this podcast with you, but we are coming up with that very soon. And I'm sure I'd come back to you and take your feedback once that happens.
Fantastic.
So thank you so much. First thing that I would like to start with is if you could share about some work that you've done in teacher education. I know you're working with Thermex before, and then with Teach for India, you've done mind-blowing work, absolutely stunning work. So if you could share some part of your journey, how did it start, and what motivated you towards teacher education? That's one very important question that listeners would love to know about.
Yeah. I think before I answer that question, a disclaimer, if I may, to all the listeners is I am not a trained teacher educator, neither am I a trained teacher. Whatever I know is 100% an opinion that I have formed just by experimentation and by a lot of observations. And the third is speaking to lots and lots of people who have actually been in the sector and in schools across the country. So I am not a trained per se. I'm more of an observer, doer, experimenter, and learn from the existing wisdom kind of a guy. So I'm an engineer by profession. So I did my engineering, mechanical engineering, and after that, at that point in time, but I also grew up in a family where both my father and my mother have been teaching for the last 32 years. So I spent a significant part of my days waking up to vector algebras and calculus and integration from my father, and my mother teaching something else for grade 9 and 10 children. That was most of my early childhood days. But I always had a fascination because there were very few teachers who fascinated me. And so it was somewhere in the early days in school itself, I started wondering, what does really teaching mean, and what kind of a teacher will fascinate me? That was the question I went. And but engineering happened, and after that, I came back into education very much as an experiment. Like, I didn't walk in knowing that this is what it will be, this is how life will be. Neither did I think of changing the world. Nothing. I just thought, okay, you know what, I need to do this. It's being a scratch in my head. Let me just scratch it off. I'll go do it. But it was a beautiful experiment. The first 2 years was a tight slap on very many things, on my privilege, on the difficulty of the profession, on the difficulty of, what, teaching is probably the most undervalued profession in our country. And why is it? And so many questions came to me during the 2 years of my fellowship at Teach for India. And I did my fellowship in Chennai. So after that, what really struck me is I want to work with government school teachers. I want to understand their life more. I want to understand, what happens inside more. I want to understand what is their motivation, because whatever I say and do, I'm still just a guy who came in as an experiment for 2 years. I always had an exit by the end of 2 years, right? And I still do have an exit. But when I look at a school teacher, especially a government school teacher, any nook and corner of the country, they made this choice until retirement. And it fascinates me to understand what made you make the choice for the next 45 years, because it's ridiculously hard. I want to know what motivates you, right? Like, so that's when I decided, okay, if I'm taking up a job after my fellowship, I'm going to take it up in an environment where I get to know more about government school teachers, and I want to work with teachers. So that's when Thermax happened. At Thermax, we did a lot of things. There was a Leadership Institute for Teachers, and under the able leadership of both Anu Aga and Meher Padanji, we did a lot of work. But more importantly, there was a lot of learnings that I had at Thermax Foundation, right? Like, in fact, one of my biggest learning, probably I'll stop with that. My biggest learning from working with teachers is training is completely different from professional development.
Yeah.
Right. That's my biggest learning, like, no, period. Like, that is my biggest learning that I had. Teacher training is a world of difference from teacher professional development. And we should probably stop training people, and we should start encouraging them to develop themselves professionally. And that was the single most powerful learning that I had working with various teachers, and a lot of teachers, more than I teaching them or I working with them, they taught me a lot. So that's been my journey with all of them so far.
Wow, that's so beautiful, and that's so profound, right? Almost everybody, or every single teacher would say, well, training, I don't know, do I really have to attend it? And I've recorded that across the country, right? 21 states I traveled and made sure that I sat in those government schools, in private schools, in all those IB schools, sat in the staff rooms. And, across the board, the first reaction that you receive when you say teacher training is, well, okay. But then when they are really introduced to something called professional development, as you mentioned, which is completely different than seminars and workshops and everything, right? And I once made a short video, 2-3 minutes long. I think it should be on YouTube. I used to still look very young then. And I started that video with asking a question that, do you think teacher training is important? And, or no, do you think teacher training works? And I said, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I said, it doesn't work because teacher training done for ticking the box, certificates, all of those things, they don't work. What works is really something different. And I think that's a very good starting point for this podcast today, that what is the difference between teacher training? I would have said good teacher training and bad teacher training, but then since we have created a distinction, teacher training and professional development, let's go and discuss what really professional development means. And I love to, keep it more like a story or a imaginative world. So imagine if you were somebody who was the decision maker to create a policy on what professional development in India would look like from tomorrow morning, what would be your vision around that? What would you want to happen for every single teacher across India? We're talking about some 10 million teachers, 1 crore teachers of India.
I think first and foremost, I think the biggest problem is it's one huge single system, right? Like 10 million teachers. And that I think is the fundamental problem of why professional development usually takes a backseat, because it's easier to do a training than professional development for 10 million teachers, or how many ever teachers we have. But if I had a choice, I would actually introduce two very important things. One is a choice. Like, I think the teacher should definitely have a choice. And creating choice is actually not just a policy matter. It's not just, I think it's a heavy level of high levels of self-awareness, right? Like, say, for example, like I'm a teacher in, let's say, grade 10th, and let's say I'm a math teacher. I need to first know what I'm really good at. I need to know what I'm not really good at. I need to know where I can push my boundaries. Only then will choice really work, right?
Yeah.
So I would recommend institutionalizing two things. One is, I think teachers should have, by design, by process, by system, by existing structures in the school, I think the teaching profession should be encouraged into a more reflective practice and not just a constant execution. Like, I think all our teachers, irrespective of they teach in an IB school or a CBSE school or an IGSE or a government state board school, I think by structure, they should have a space, they should have the time to sit back and think, okay, so what have I done in the last 25 days? What do I want to do in the next 25 days? If we keep putting them in a mill, if we keep putting them in a machinery, and they don't reflect, there is no awareness. And when there is no awareness, give them a million different tools, I don't think it still matters. Like, you can give them a million different choices, I don't think it will still matter, because they don't have the time and the energy and the mind space to have reflected on what it is. So first is institutionalize a reflective way of teaching, and the second is back it up with a plethora of options. Like, for example, what a Suraasa does, right? You guys have courses all the way from child protection all the way to content expertise, and that's the plethora that we're talking about. Like, child safety is a very important integral aspect of what a teacher does. Why are we not giving that as an option to learn, right? Like, so those are the two things. Like, one is reflective practice, and the second being back the reflective practice with plethora of option for them to explore by themselves.
Beautiful. What I hear is, and please correct me if I'm going a bit tangential to what you said. So what I hear is, teachers should be skilled enough to realize what they need to be professionally developed on, and they become accountable for deciding what professional development should be given to them. Then a third person who might not even know what is the requirement of this teacher, and one size fits all approaches should be reduced from teacher training. And I think that's absolutely what would really work as a national level solution, that if we had to create that. We are not saying that everybody needs to be trained on these 5 things. We are saying, okay, these are 50 things. Everybody has their own unique requirements. Let's first train everybody on how to identify your unique training requirement, and then let them choose whatever training that they want.
Correct.
Beautiful. And you worked for both Thermex and now for Teach for India. And at Teach for India, you are doing a lot of work with different schools in Chennai. You said you're the city director for Chennai.
Correct.
So any particular experience that you'd like to share where you think that something was done, some change came because of some actions of some teachers or of your team? Any particular incident or any particular experience you'd like to share? Again, if it's related to teacher training, that will be great. But even if it's actually related to teaching and learning, even with the students, it would be wonderful if you could share.
Yeah. So I think I'm lost for choices because there's so many instances. So I'm just taking a second to think which one might be most relevant for all the listeners. So maybe I'll share this one particular instance. Right? Like, so I had a chance to be on a table with about 8 different teachers about a few months back, right? Like, I mean, in fact, a little more than a few months back, just before the pandemic, if I may actually. So it had teachers from, one of them was from a government school, another was from an international school, and like, there was a variety of teachers in there, and
Right.
all of them had 30 years of experience. All of them had 35
Wow.
years or 25, 30 years of experience, much elder than to me, both in experience, wisdom, as well as in age, right? Like, so I was there, and we were actually together solving, and also this happened something beyond Teach for India. So this was my own personal experience, right? Like, so I was sitting with them, and we were trying to come up with a lesson plan for differentiation, right? Like, we were really thinking of, okay, so how do I differentiate? Like, now, how does a lesson plan get differentiated? What do I do? And they had multitudes of ideas, right? Like, so I think they were very, very, very skilled. I thought what they had was a plethora of knowledge. Where I saw a gap was, okay, so you have so much knowledge as a teacher, you have so much knowledge and realistic knowledge from the classroom. Like, I mean, like 30-year of experience, they would have gotten what, like 1,000 people graduated over the years. So, like, a lot of experience. Then they had a lot of ideas, a lot of processes. But what I thought, and one small thing that I noticed was, okay, so this idea is great, this knowledge is great, but what are we going to do with all of this for a child who is now 17 years old in 2022?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's as simple as that. Like, how do we make that happen? Maybe it
Yeah.
worked for a child in 2000, maybe it worked in 2010 also. Like, has it worked in 2022? So I just, and I bravely put it out there. If you don't mind, if I may ask, do you think it will still work for a 15-year-old in your classroom, in a ninth standard classroom? I said, actually, I haven't really thought about it. And what would you have to say? So I just proposed a very small, very simple to use framework, very simple to use tool. And they were so humble enough to say, you know what, this actually makes sense. I'm going to try it, and I'm going to let you know what happened. And interestingly, and that was the first and last time I saw the teacher, but after a few days or so, when I got to meet again, somewhere, just for a moment or so, she did mention, like, it actually worked, and thank you. So I think the reason why I shared that example, Rishabh, is for the simple fact that I think today, in our education system, at least as far as my observation goes, we have a lot of experienced teachers. Like, we have lots and lots and lots of experienced teachers, which is not being backed up by the number of youngsters coming into the profession. Right? The number of BEd seats that are going empty, the number of education colleges that have empty seats today is increasing, and it's a highly misbalanced system, or it's at least getting into a misbalanced system from the way I see it. So with the existing teachers, and when I speak about teacher professional development, this was a very small idea. And what I did there was actually not trained. I just gave a different way of thinking. In fact, a very, very simple to use, easy to understand way of thinking. And the teacher actually went back and tried. And that's the beauty. It's not, the beauty is not me giving that idea. Anybody can give an idea. But the beauty is actually the teacher found it interesting enough to go back, try it in the classroom, and see if it really works or not. And that's a very personally powerful thing that happened for me over the last 1 year or so.
That's wonderful. So you see how a good teacher, even with 30 years of experience, would be open to ideas, right? Would be somebody who's open to
100%.
learn and open to listen to others. And one challenge that I've seen with so many teachers across the world, not just India now, across the world, is, the people who think that I now know it. And, when those doors get closed. And I've seen experiences of vice principals, principals sitting with me, and I'm talking about international, right? UK, Dubai, India, a lot. That the door was closed, and then it took some effort. But when that door opened, they realized, oh my God, what all I have been missing. And, I think that's majorly also because we've kind of accepted teaching as such a normal job, while it is not a normal job. It's a highly skilled requirement job, right? And you mentioned earlier in the conversation that teaching is one of the most undervalued, but still one of the most difficult jobs around the world. And which really means that if it is one of the most difficult jobs, we should be getting some of the best people into the jobs. So ideal situation should be, the best brain comes for the most difficult job, and we should have the best people teaching. However, the reality is that if you go to a 12th standard student today, or the best of the students in universities today, and you ask them how many of you want to become teachers, specifically school teachers, well, the results are going to be pretty disheartening. So I keep thinking about this. How do we make teaching more aspirational, teaching career more inspirational? And I know you're somebody who works on the ground. You're somebody who works very closely with teachers. So I'd love to brainstorm with you today, on this call, on this podcast, on what could we really do to make teaching inspirational. So some of the ideas that I have is, if we could actually make teachers' life cycle or career management more attractive. That's what we do at Suraasa as well, right? So we pick up those ideas and then we start working on them. So how do we say that, if you picked up, let's say, software engineering as a career, and you would have made XYZ transitions in your career and grown in so much money, you would have opportunities to go to the US and work. That's like that thing for engineers, that I'll get an opportunity abroad. If we could build something like that for teaching, and then we could go out to the graduates, to the younger generations, and say, you see, teaching gives all of those things, but it is a difficult job. That's one way of doing that. Any other ideas that you think we can kind of share with the listeners today? And I know these are all very hands-on, very we are just improvising the conversation on what all could be done. These are very big problems, world problems, that we are discussing here on our discussion today. But this would be really amazing for listeners to hear, that what all could be done.
In fact, the very same question is something that I put on LinkedIn a few weeks back.
Wow.
Saying that, okay, so I'm seeking opinions and articles and research and connections. What I want to know is, how do we make teaching profession aspirational? So it's something that I have put, and I got a few interesting responses. And it was quite interesting, right? Now, I've been thinking about this very question for the last 1.5 years. Like, really, like, this has given me sleepless nights, honestly. And I'm a little bit of a mad person when it comes to that. So when I have a question and it keeps hitting me.
Welcome to the club. Sorry, cutting you, but welcome to the club.
So this question has been troubling me deeply for the last 1.5 years. And honestly, I don't know what to do to make the teaching profession aspirational. But for two things that I'm coming to a conclusion. One is, I think we need a social activism. So first and foremost, get teaching profession more aspirational. I don't think it can just be a systemic solution of increasing the pay. I don't know if it will work. Like making the teaching profession, like fancy schools and air conditions and smart boards. Will it attract talent? I don't know. Like, let's bring in the best international curriculums into every single government and private and individually owned schools. I don't know if that will attract the talent. If we bring in 100% funds into the school, will it happen? I don't know. What I know is, today we are taking the teaching profession for granted. Today we are I'll give you a simple example, right? Like in from my own experience, when I was an engineer and when I used to tell people that I work for so and so company, we immediately make a mind map, right? Like, okay, so you work in that company, then your CTC must be this and that, and they make a mental mind map of, okay, so maybe your parents are doing that, and maybe your parents are doing that. It's the same person. After 2.5 years, I quit my engineering job and I was doing teaching, and people ask me, what do you do? I say, I teach. Immediately people ask, what do you mean you teach? You seem to be young. So I was like, so what? I am a young teacher. Now, thank you for the compliment that I'm young, but I still am a teacher. And it's like, how do you make ends meet? Okay, who do you think is going to give you, a girl's hand in marriage? Like, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the way the society really looks at this is one extreme that I find. The other extreme that I find is, oh wow, you're in such a noble profession. You're going to be doing service, and a doctor and teaching are two professions. It's written in our scripts and whatnot. Like, it's true. I'm not denying the fact, but I don't think we should just stop with that. We need to convert that into the way we look at a teacher. So that's one, right? Like, how do we get the society to start looking at the teaching profession? And that is a social change, not a systemic one at all. So that's one thing that I would, and which means I would from a very personal standpoint, I would say I think it should become a political agenda. I don't think it should just be a systemic agenda. I think it should be a political agenda for teaching profession to become aspirational, irrespective of, is it state politics or central politics? It doesn't matter. Like, it should just be a political agenda for it to be, for the profession to be looked upon as an aspirational one. That's one. But at a systemic level, what I really think is giving more options and choices for teachers. Like, for example, this is one conversation that I had with one of the teachers, a dear friend of mine, and they have been teaching in various different contexts, CBSE, state board, etc. They said something very powerful, and it hit me very, very hard because it was very true. Hey, you know what? Your question is legit now, but look at it this way. I am so and so. Let's say I'm 30 years old. I joined the profession as teacher, and for me to grow internally, it's going to take me 25 years to become, let's say, a head of the department, or if I'm going, for me to become a principal of the school. The best promotion I might get in the next 20 to 25 years is probably more from a primary teacher to a secondary teacher, or from a secondary teacher to a higher secondary teacher. So professionally, I have nothing to look up to, apart from the fact that I teach matrices for the next 20 years.
Wow.
Right now, I need to do the same syllabus again and again. Like, maybe if I'm lucky, if I'm one is if I'm lucky, two is if I really appreciate the syllabus change, as a teacher, and not maybe I might have a different curriculum, different textbook, so that brings in a little bit of a different flavor. But over and above beyond that, like, there is nothing that I can look up to in my profession. So I think the growth of a teacher inside a school, be it a government school or a private school, I think that needs some serious looking into. Like, how do we ensure that there is some growth internally? And this is something that I'm talking from a school's context, but today the world is also moving into a blended school and a completely online model as well. Even in that, I think there is a lot of scope for us to look at how does a teacher grow, and how do they have something to look up to grow, and not just monetarily, right? Like, it's not just about monetary benefits. In fact, some of the countries, and as part of my understanding, I've been trying to understand which are the countries that pay the most. And when I look into it, their student learning outcomes are not, super duper much better. It's not like that means pay is probably not working. Yeah. Like, then if something has to work, then I personally think at a systemic level, there needs to be something that a teacher can look up to. It could be it could be performance management. It could be more choices. It could be a variety. And personally, Rishabh, some of the teachers that I have found very enthusiastic, very curious. Maybe it's my bias playing out, or maybe it's my lack of technical knowledge that's making me say this. But what I have noticed is I found a significant difference in the joy and in the amount of innovation and the amount of willingness to learn among teachers in the international bachelorette schools. I find a lot of different. There's a very different level of energy. And personally, I don't think it's about the pay. I think it's about how well the teacher gets an option to design his or her own curriculum inside the classroom. I think it has to do about when do I teach, what do I teach? And there is also a natural emphasis to work with other teacher, like a maths teacher teaching statistics through music. Wow. Or a music teacher, teaching sports along with the PET teacher, or the PET teacher actually teaching spoken English along with the English teacher, right? Like, there is a lot that happens there. And when that happens, I don't have time to sit idle and worry about my problems in my profession. Like, I'm always on the foot. I'm moving fast, and I'm moving big, and I have more things to try. I have more things to explore. It's the normal basic human tendency to just be curious, right? Like, to experiment. That is what we need to tap into systemically. And at a social level, the way we look at teachers needs to change, not just between you and me, but all the 130 crore Indians and people beyond have to change the way we look at it, teaching and teaching profession.
Absolutely wonderful. These were some of the thoughts. It's as if you were mirroring my thoughts from what I keep thinking over the, over the last so many months, so many years, what I've been thinking. I'll just pick up from what you said, right? That the next generations, they might actually look at teaching profession in a different light one, because of who they are, it might not actually be about money. When I'm talking to various youngsters, I'm talking about uh, st- uh, uh, youth in the age group of 21 to 24. We had a lot of people in technology, in content, in different teams, at Suraasa, at that age group. And I find them absolutely clear about their requirements, about their needs. They're so passionate about things. And I think this is a change that we are looking at the next generations now. I think we have moved, as a
Yeah.
society, we have moved higher in the Maslow's hierarchy, that our basics are now taken care of. So we are now moving towards more of self-actualization. And just yesterday, I was talking to this 24-year-old guy, and I asked him, why do you want to change your job? It's a very good job where you're working, and you said that you're passionate about that, and you're passionate about teacher education as well, but you're really passionate about that. Said that, I feel that I'm not adding enough back to the society. This is a 24-year-old telling me that I'm not adding back enough to the society. And while he might be making maybe similar, or maybe a bit higher or a bit lower in money here with us, with the offer that we had for that position, but he was very clear that I want a place where I can enjoy myself, I can add something back to the society, I can create a difference to the world. Now, if we're talking about this generation and the generations that follow, and when we say we have to make teaching aspirational or inspirational for these people, we need to know what are they thinking. And if they are thinking from a perspective that money is not the most important thing for me, it is the second or the third important thing, but for me, the important part is, how do I really solve a problem, right? And that was one of the things that he mentioned, that I want to solve a bigger problem, I want to solve a puzzle. How do we really take it out to the world and let the world know? Just like you said, it's a society level problem. Let the world know that teaching is not as simple and easy as everybody thinks. That, okay, what does it take to become a teacher? It takes a lot to become a teacher.
Yeah.
And I think the new document from the government, you mentioned about government level change and political, political, what do you say, focus coming on that. So the new document, National Professional Standards for Teachers, that has come out, I'm right. So they're talking about all the skills, everything that a teacher needs to have, some progression routes. I think there's some good things being done. Let's just keep our fingers crossed. Let's hope it becomes aspirational for teachers, and we attract youth towards teaching profession. Which brings me to a very important question, DM. Since you work with a lot of teachers, and you would have worked with teachers of different age groups, right? So in your experience, what is the major difference that you see in teachers with less than 10 years of experience and teachers with more than 20 years of experience today? So I've left that 10 to 20 part as a transition and gray area, but then new teachers, young teachers, what do you see a difference in them today, and teachers who have been there? Is there a difference in approach? Is there a difference in any particular thought process that you'd like to share?
I actually don't think there's a lot of age is a factor in how good a teacher is, but I think with age comes a few very important things, which I think even as teacher trainers and even as organizations working in education, we take for granted. What I find with teachers with more number of experience is they know how to save their energy. Because standing for 8 hours in a classroom and shouting for 8 hours, and if you're in a primary or a pre-primary classroom running behind children for 5 to 6 hours a day is not an easy task. And especially when you're going to do it for 280 days odd in a particular year, it's just not going to be easy. So what I find is with age comes that maturity of not just a maturity, but an understanding of how do I save my energy. And it really matters. And it's not just the question of energy, because the more number of days I'm going to come in with a higher energy, more number of days children and I are going to enjoy teaching and learning. So energy, I think, in a teacher's profession is an absolutely very, very, very important thing to do. So that's one thing that I find very, very interesting. The second thing that I find with experience that comes with teachers is the observation skill. Right? Like I could be standing in front of the class, like there could be 35, or let's say in some of the government schools across the country, 120 children, And I know who exactly is not listening, who is actually sitting, and who is chit chatting. And it's a very, very important, beautiful skill that's most necessary for, especially if you're going to do and talk about in person, and even more so in an online classroom, right? Like, so those are two very important skills. And the third skill that I have usually found come very naturally with experience, not age, but experience, I would say, is just the pedagogical maturity that they bring in. Like the same topic can be taught in 55 different forms, or maybe more, like maybe even 500 forms. But with experience, there comes a level of understanding of, okay, this works best for this kind of children, this works best for this kind of children, this works best. And that is cannot be documented anywhere, that cannot be written anywhere, that cannot be passed on from one generation to the other either. It just has to be learned by falling flat again and again, the multiple years of failures of trying to teach the same thing. I think those are the three important things that comes with age, more than age, the experience, the years of experience that comes with. And I am a big believer in the fact that classrooms should have a young teacher as well as somebody with an experience. I'm a very strong believer in it, because the young person is going to bring in the latest ways, latest pedagogy. They're going to bring in the latest technology. They're going to bring in a very different kind of energy that the students can most relate to, right? At the same time, the elder person can actually bring in that maturity, the calmness in the classroom of how do you handle, how do you observe, who is doing well, who is not doing well. Hey, it's not going to work with that person. And that level of mentoring inside the class, in the school, is I'm a big fan of. I've tried it a few times and hasn't really worked for various human factors, but I still continue to believe in the idea of a young teacher and a elder teacher sitting together in a classroom and exploring the profession together. It has more pros than cons, but to make it work is going to be really, really hard.
It would need a lot of planning for both of them to really, come to that level. So very interesting. The thing that came out of your, your reply and your answer was that there are things that they've learned and they have learned by experience, which might be very difficult to teach or very difficult to document and create a standard operating procedure out of that. I 100% agree that there will be that skill level maturity that would come. But then, would there be some way we could assess that which are the teachers who are able to develop that maturity faster than others, or what is the difference that comes in the the outcomes, the student learning outcomes, or the student learning results that we talk about? And when I say results, I don't really mean the grades and everything, but really that the learning happened. Could there be, is there any one, do you have any, or do you use any scale or any metric, any metric to check that does somebody have it in them to basically be able to handle that learning experience right now to a very good level or not? Or could there be something which could be developed? And if it could be developed, what would you foresee it as? And it might be actually something that I would love to know at a personal level as well, so that maybe I'll just borrow that idea from you and ask my team to start working on it to build something around that. So, if you could share that.
Yeah. No, I think with respect to this, I teach for India, and I'm a big believer of this idea of teaching as a leadership. It's not a very new idea, right? Like there's been a lot of thoughts and research that has gone behind this whole idea of teaching as leadership, right? Like it's beautiful if you think about it. Let's take, for example, any high-paying job in the country, right? Like it might demand an ability to understand the business, the ability to understand the customer, the ability to market your idea. It will demand an ability to sell your idea. It will demand an ability to understand, like what's the most efficient way to reach that or do that. It's going to demand a physical exhaustion, like a physical hard work. A teacher's job requires all of that. It actually, because see, I could go into a classroom and I say, hey, you know what? This is matrices, this is determinants, this is what's calculus. But what I'm doing there is I'm selling the idea in my head to 35 children to get them to understand the way I have understood it in the past. I'm actually marketing the idea of calculus. I would say I'm actually selling the idea of a calculus And I truly believe, and I was just quoting that as an example, but where I was heading to is, I truly believe teaching is leadership. It's leadership, not just because you lead a classroom of 35 and everybody zips their mouth when you ask them to do, and everybody plays when you ask them to do. That, not that kind of a leadership, but more from a lens of I'm leading these 35 by example. Like, they're going to want to do what I do. I am the role model here. They're going to want to do what I do, and I have to come up with a million different ideas for me to do it. So at Teach for India, we follow this idea of teaching as leadership, and we look at our teachers' practices, and we look at teachers' pedagogical practices, their competencies. For example, ability to execute a lesson plan, ability to create a lesson plan, ability to engage children positively. All of this into a matrix called teaching as a leadership. And we constantly get our teachers to reflect on this tool. We constantly ask them to, okay, you know what, I'm not saying you're at, it's a rubric. I'm not saying you are at 2 or 3 or 5. You tell me where do you feel you are, and you tell me where do you want to go in the next 1 to 2 months, right? Like, it's a very reflective exercise, and I do think it works. I genuinely do think it works, because in the rut and run of working with inside a classroom consistently, just a simple tool like that gets us to sit, pause, and think, you know what, my execution levels are not where I want them to be. My planning skills are not where I want them to be. It was 25 days since I actually sat and had a cup of tea with my HM. Why haven't I not done that in the last 25 days? As simple as that, a tool will get me to reflect on these basic things. Hey, the 8th standard math teacher seems to be doing a fantastic job with statistics. Maybe I should just sit with her and understand, like, am I doing a peer learning of sorts? So I think when we put all of this in a tool, and the tool is actually, in my opinion, is not the purpose in itself, but the tool is a fantastic reminder, and it's a fantastic way to get us to reflect on where I am and where I want to be. I think the more and more we document that, and teachers reflect and start documenting the reflections they have, I think that's a beautiful way for us to identify those teachers faster, who are faster in understanding the tricks of the trade, if I may, and move to the next levels of maturity within the profession itself. And at some point in time, maybe we can also discuss on what's this teaching as leadership, how we're using it at Teach for India. More than happy to probably discuss on that sometime later as well, Rishabh.
Sure. I would love to get on a different, call, and let's expand on that. In fact, if you could just maybe share some more things about what is teaching for leadership here for the listeners, and let them also go back and explore what is teaching for leadership. I think it's worth everybody to know, and then we'll build something around that. So what is it? What is it as an idea? Who can participate in it? Is it open for all the teachers?
No, it's not an initiative, Rishabh. It's a framework. It's a tool that we have developed. Like, essentially it's a framework. What the teaching as leadership framework is doing is it's identifying the top competencies and skill a teacher is supposed to have. Right?
Super.
Let's take, for example, planning as a skill. Now, if I'm going to plan for a skill, if I'm going to plan for let's say, lesson plan of sorts, now the plan can be broken down into an exemplar lesson plan. The plan can also be, okay, it's actually at a beginner stage. Right? Like, let's take a very simple example of a beginner lesson plan and an intermediate lesson plan, and let's say an exemplar lesson plan. Now, if we are able to put a pin on it and say, this is what makes a plan into a beginner's lesson plan. These are the components of a lesson plan that makes your lesson plan into a let's say an intermediate, and this is what makes it an exemplar. And showing that to a teacher is going to help them reflect, okay, so for me to move from this to that, these are the competencies I need to be building on. These are the competencies I need to improve. It's actually as simple as that, and it's not a new concept. Like, if listeners can actually just Google up teaching as leadership rubric or teaching as leadership framework, there are so many versions of it. Like, you can actually download it, and you can also read about it. And it's a fantastic tool, and it's a long, like, the original tool actually runs about some 7-8 pages. It might be intimidating, but the more we read into it, the more clarity we actually get around it.
Wow. This sounds really interesting. And it's actually, as I hear it, it's actually very I'll not say similar to, but very close to the concept of the national professional standards for teachers that have come out. So they've kind of defined all the different domains that a teaching profession should
That's
have.
exactly what I was going to add next. Only difference being this is not a rating framework. It's a reflective framework. That
Nice.
is where it becomes very, very, very different. It's not just about a rating, right? So for example, I mean, I have done some research to try to understand how do various governments, look at performance management for their teachers. And when I do that, for example, in Australia or for that matter in New Zealand, and there are so many things that are already available on the internet. Like there are so many documents that they have made public, and I go into it. Everything, end of the day, it comes into standardized assessments and it comes into standardized rating. But the moment we bring in the word leadership, it's not just about rating. A rating might help us understand the quantitative aspect of it, but what is really important there is the qualitative aspect of it. Right? So when, for example, I am a teacher, and if you're going to tell me, hey, DM, you know what? I think you're at a 1 on execute, and I think you're at a 1.5 on planning, it's going to take me some time to understand. It's going to take me some time to even process it. And for all I know, I might even take it personally. Right? Now, if I'm going to, let's say, if you I'm a teacher, and if Rishabh, the HM of the school, or let's say you're my manager, you're coming and telling, hey, this is a framework. DM, why don't you tell me where do you think you are? Right?
Yeah.
And if I'm going to tell, hey, you know what, I think I'm at a 3. But then you're going to have a conversation with me. Okay, so you feel you're at a 3, but you know what? I think you're probably at a 1, and this is why I think. Now you and I are going to have a conversation, not a directional one, right? Like we're going to have a conversation, and maybe we will align at a 2, right? Maybe I'm quite happy with the 2, and maybe you're unhappy with the 2, but we still acknowledge the fact that these are the aspects that we need to improve on. And I think that there lies the beauty, where I acknowledge, not you telling me as a teacher, I acknowledge that, okay, fine, I am at a 1 and I do want to see myself at a 3. Could you tell me what I'm supposed to do next? And could you tell me what are some things that I would like to go try inside my classroom? And I think the beauty there is subtle but brilliant. It's just a world of difference between being told that, you do a bad job, or you do a fantastic job as well, right? Like it's not just in this spectrum. The other spectrum as well. Like if you tell me blindly, you are one of the best teachers I have seen, DM. Oh wow, amazing. I might feel on cloud 9, and it might happen 2 times, it might happen 3 times, it might even happen 10 times. At some point I'll start wondering, but why do you think I'm the best teacher? And if you're unable to tell me why, basically I would just say you've been lying to me all this while. Right? So I think that's the beauty of breaking it down and getting the teacher to reflect. Like they come up with the reflection to say, I am here and I want to be here. Right? Like, so I think that's the subtle beauty of reflective practices. And that's also a fantastic way from a managerial perspective, for us to understand, okay, so how aware is the teacher? And typically from my experience, the most aware teachers are usually the ones that end up picking up the tricks of the trade much faster than the rest of them. So that's been my experience overall.
That's wonderful. In fact, we here at Suraasa, we believe in reflection and reflective practices, just as a core of any teacher to teachers' core skills. Hello, am I still there?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh, got it. So for us, we do this one teacher skilling program, which is like an annual program, a long-term 1-year-long program, and one of the core pillars in that is reflection and reflective practices. I'll request my team to share a link of one of those courses, which is on reflection and reflective practices, with you, and love to have your feedback on that. If we could actually spread it across, we would love to send it across to some people and get their feedback on, does it really prepare? Because I think right from the first topic that we discussed to even now, one thing we just really continued is, if a teacher is able to identify and define where they are, professional development would be much more engaging and much more successful. And if we can build good professional development, I think the profession as a whole would develop to a level where we could look at making teaching aspirational again. Right. At this note, I would request you, if you could actually also give a message for people who might be thinking of becoming a teacher. What should they consider? What should their thought process be? What should be the litmus test to check whether it is the right decision for them or not? And if they decide, what should they be prepared for? So if you could share a message on that, that would be wonderful.
Thank you so much for that question, Rishabh. I think that is the most important and fundamental point of the discussion today as well. So for all these prospective teachers out there, and I'll very honestly say, don't walk into the teaching job thinking it's an easy one. Like, it's not an easy one. Is it a noble one? It's for you to decide. Like, you can decide if it is a noble one, is it not a noble one? It's for you to decide. But will it give you a sense of satisfaction? 100% yes, right? No 2 days will ever be the same. You can go in on Monday to the same classroom for 280 days. After 280 days, go to the same classroom on 281st day. You can assure that all 281 days were different from each other.
Yeah.
Children are different, their moods are different, the feelings that they bring to the classroom is different. And that, I think, is the most beautiful thing, because in that kind of an environment is meant for people who enjoy uncertainty. It's meant for people who enjoy just a constant state of chaos, right? There's always chaos, and no positive one. Like, chaos is always not a bad thing, it's also a good thing. So it's for people who enjoy dynamic work environments, right? Like, it's for people who enjoy working with a plethora of people. If you really think you want to work with 25 different people, teaching is the right job for you. I think it brings out so many areas of work that we need to do. And I'll go a little overboard and I'll say, we do need teachers who are good coders. We do need teachers who are data analysts. We do need teachers who are business analysts. We do need teachers who are MBAs and marketing and sales professionals, because teaching is a place where you teach what the audience asks, and everybody is an audience in the teaching profession, right? Like, everybody is seeking something, and if you can offer, and if you can commit, and if you can survive in a dynamic, uncertain world, and if you enjoy it, I think teaching profession is 100% is your game. Don't think, just come in, and there's so much opportunity. And I think India is buzzing with the number of opportunities for teaching profession. And to say the least, the pandemic has also definitely catalyzed the process significantly. So opportunities are there. Do walk in and make a difference in whichever small way you can.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, DM. And we call this podcast series Inspiring Educators, as in we talk to educators who are inspiring and inspirational for others, and the purpose is to inspire educators. And I think that last message from you really matches the very, very theme of this podcast series, that how do we build inspiring educators. It was lovely talking to you, and we at Suraasa are really looking at building this community of the best teaching professionals around the world, making a difference. And well, there is this one little selfish interest that I have in my heart, that I want to see an Indian teacher in every part of the world. I want to see that, when you see a teacher and that respect that you build for a teacher, imagine there's an Indian teacher in every single city and people respecting them. We actually are building that respect for our country. So that's why we all work day and night to build that teaching community in India as well. So that's separate, but thank you so much for your time. I love
Lovely for having me, and thank you so much. Have a lovely new year 2022, Rishabh and the team. And you guys are doing some fantastic job.
Thank you so much, DM. Looking forward to see you soon. And next time I'm in Chennai, I'm coming, and we are catching up for a coffee and a meal together for sure.
100%.
See you. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.